Hello, friends, and welcome to Snap Take. This is Glazer of Snap Judgments, the official podcast of Marvel Snap Zone, and I'd like to begin today's video. I know there's an OTA. I know I have a 70% win rate deck, but I gotta say happy birthday to my son, Noah. I love you very much. I'm so proud of you. He turns 8 years old today, and I want him to know how special he is to me. All right, that said, we've got a 70% win rate Cannonball deck. It's great. The OTA does not ruin it. We'll talk more about that in a minute. And then we've also got an OTA. We're going to jump right into that OTA. I'm not going to make you wait. I'm literally just going to go over the cards and changes. So we've got first, Captain Marvel becomes a 4/5 from a 4/4. Captain Marvel was a 4/5 when first nerfed from a 5/6 and was one of the best cards in the game. So second dinner nerfed it and nerfed it right out of the meta. I don't think this is going to be enough this time. I think Captain Marvel will obviously be better and see more play with one more power, but the game was in a much lower powered state back when her 4/5 was one of the best cards in the game. Silky's Move was one of the best decks, and while it's good now, making her a 4/7 with Elsa is fine, right? Like, that's nice. That's going to win you a couple games of Snap. But ultimately, I think that this is probably not enough for the card. I think I'd like to see her go to a 4/6 with a little more time passing before then. Although we may have a real Cerebro 5 deck right now, and I want to talk more about that. I'm going to build that. I'm going to get that tested by some real top-notch players, I promise. But I think we've got 3 1/5s, and Black Swan, who's a 3/5, and Captain Marvel, who's a 4/5, and then another card we're going to talk about. So I think there might be something real here. All right, next up, Apocalypse was apparently way overperforming and was nerfed to a 6/6. I hate this change. I think it's fine, right? Like, discard was good, but discard hadn't really ever been good, and I think it could have done to have more time in the sun, especially because they didn't get rid of Thanos really yet. So it was at best the second best deck, and I think killing it prematurely is sort of a disservice to discard. Not that this kills it, but it does weaken it a fair amount. That first discard now makes Apocalypse a 6/10, not a 6/12. Right? Like, that's a major difference. Those extra 2 power are an absolutely major difference. And like, when you have to play an Apocalypse base outright, it's now absolutely terrible. A 6/6 is absolutely terrible stats. I don't like this change, like, in the slightest. Yes, discard was posting outside stats right now, but I don't think that was necessarily a problem, because it was doing that while people weren't really trying to tech against it. No one was playing or building specifically to beat discard right now. People are playing and building specifically to beat Thanos. And while that's the case, I think discard was just kind of fine being the next best thing, and we'd see if it was the actual best once people didn't have to constantly play and not play things because Thanos existed. Again, I don't really like this change. I think it was very aggressive. The big change here is a Mind Stone goes from a 1/1 to a 2/1, and Thanos loses a lot of consistency. The best card in Thanos right now, outside of Thanos himself, is probably Mockingbird. Hope is up there, but it's probably Mockingbird, and now that is harder to do. You have to play that Mind Stone on turn 2 to get the ability, which is strong, but now that you can't get those extra cards on 1, right, like, you're messing up your whole curve as you go forward by playing that stone on 2. So it's a significantly worse card. You must play it exactly on 2 if you want to get it on Hope. You can't play it on 1 or 2. You're limited. You're much more limited. Fine. Thanos is definitely weaker today than it was yesterday, but this isn't going to be enough. This is a good step 1. I think the card needs a rework. I have what my rework suggestion is. I'm not going to make you wait to hear it. I want Thanos's change to be exactly this. Thanos's change should be when you draw Thanos, he must be played that game as soon as you have the energy available. So if you have 6 energy, you have to play Thanos. You don't get to skip playing Thanos. He whether that's turn 5, turn 6, turn 4, whenever, right? You can do it in wave and play it on turn 4, I don't care. But when you draw Thanos, you have to play Thanos. That means on turn 5, no more vision. You're putting a big Shang-Chi target out. You have to start running Kyra again. You're opening yourself up to risk. And on 6, if you draw Thanos late, or you didn't ramp on turn 5, now you have to play Thanos instead of Goliath, instead of Blob. And I think that basically fixes Thanos and brings it in line. Thanos is trying to get his hands on the Infinity Stones eventually. He eventually does come into play, so it fits the theme of the character. Plus, Thanos is inevitable, and this makes him being played inevitable. I like it a lot. I think that's the change that would bring Thanos in line. I'm hoping that Second Dinner sees it and takes it. Psylocke becomes a 2/1 from a 2/2. It was apparently one of the most winning cards in Thanos, and I'm wondering a little bit if there's some selection bias there, because for a lot of the period we're looking at, the Italians, the top-level Italians, were the players who put Psylocke into Thanos first, and it was all like the tournament grinders who were playing that exact deck. So I think that since they played the most, there's some selection bias. I don't think Psylocke is necessarily that far ahead of the curve, but hey, it was extremely good. It's only in Thanos, right? So hitting it only affects Thanos, and I think that's ultimately a positive thing. Next up, Adam Warlock becomes a 5/5. That's the other thing that makes Cerebro 5 better. I think Cerebro 5 is probably a really good deck right now. Does it want Adam Warlock? Depends if it wants Magic. If it doesn't want Magic, it doesn't want Warlock. But if it does want Magic, I think it really, really would love Adam Warlock, because it could do something along the lines of whatever nonsense early, right? Like play some early game 5s, say a Blizzard on turn 2, for example. Turn 3 Magic, turn 4 Captain Marvel, turn 5 Adam Warlock. Try and draw your Black Swan so that you can play Cerebro with the 3 1-drop 5s, which would be Ant-Man, Titania, and Martyr. Once you have 1/7s being played along with a 4/7 and so on, I think that you're getting far enough ahead and you're powerful enough that I think that we're good to go now. All right, next up, we have a bunch of Guardians changes. All the Guardians were changed to give exactly +4, and each gets to be 1 ahead of what the expected curve would be. So Rocket is a 1/1 now, that becomes a 1/5. Star-Lord stays a 2/2, but can rise to a 2/6 instead of a 2/5. Groot can rise to a 3/7, so he goes down to a 3/3. Again, 1 ahead of rate, right? 1 ahead of like the next thing you'd expect. Drax becomes a 4/5 to a 4/9 instead of a 4/8. Gamora becomes a 5/8 to a 5/12. I think this is real. I think this is like actually probably a real difference for at least several decks. I don't think these are great, but Rocket's now a 5, so like Cerebro 5 or Zoo decks, he's worth running all of a sudden. He's worth the downside risk at the end of the game for a 1/5. Good. Star-Lord as a 2/6 is pretty close to worth the risk, depending on the meta. Depending on, like, in a Sarah deck where you know what they're going to play, you can get a 1/6 out of them. Maybe that's worth it all of a sudden, right? Groot, I think, is actually good, because Storm except that War Machine is going to kill Storm in a few days, right? But if War Machine is not as good as expected, Groot and Drax into Storm, and particularly in a Surfer build, but also potential other lockdown things, can be quite good. And Gamora was already a good card. This just lowers her downside. She's still the exact same stats as she was before. So I think that's really good. We're going to be exploring, I'm going away, but we're going to be exploring all these cards, all these decks going forward, so stay tuned for that. Also, we still have a Thanos Cannonball deck, and it freaking works. What this deck did, fundamentally, Eva played it. Eva replaced one card. He basically just took a card and said, that's Cannonball now. That card would be Professor X Goliath, whatever. It's that swing spot that often gets changed. In this case, it's Cull Obsidian that's gone. Isn't that crazy? We're losing Cull Obsidian for Cannonball. So that's not as strange as it sounds, though, right? Because if Mind Stone costs 2, and when this was made, he didn't know Mind Stone was going to cost 2. But if Mind Stone costs 2, then all of a sudden it makes an awful lot more sense for, you're going to need to play that on turn 4 a lot to get those stones out. And if you're playing it on turn 4 to get those stones out to get Mockingbird cheap, then an extra 5 makes some more sense than an extra 4 in some cases. You're also far more protected from opposing Shang-Chi here. They have to get your Blob or Magneto, otherwise you're just putting so much stats down that's basically protected. You never play Thanos, which is why I want that Thanos fix. You should also be able to get priority because you're putting a lot of Shang-proof stuff down, so Goliath, and when you can't, Cannonball and Shang-Chi should win the game. Cannonball is basically built to win the mirror match for Thanos decks. If you're losing Prio, it's straight up a blob killer, but even if it's hitting your opponent's Magneto and pushing it elsewhere or blowing it up, you are perfectly freaking happy. This deck is sick. This is one of my favorite Cannonball builds. It's not my favorite Cannonball build, and that's still coming later this video. Alright, so you can find Eva at twitch.tv/Evazord. Eva's a Brazilian player, speaks Portuguese but also speaks English. Absolutely phenomenal, top-notch player. This deck went 71-30 with a set, which is a 70.3 win percentage, and Eva went from rank 99 to rank 36 with this in 7 hours, which is just through the roof. Amazing win rate in the top 100, and worth playing, worth checking about, worth caring about. Cannonball is replacing Cull here, so again, this is a curve issue and a Shang issue. Cull basically says, I am a great card, I'm a powerful card, you're going to have trouble winning here, but I also give your opponent, who's probably running Shang-Chi, an early Shang-Chi target. Is Cannonball better than Cull? I have no idea, you have no idea, we have no idea yet. But since this is doing so well right now, it is worth continuing that test so we learn whether it is, and if they're both so good, whether there's something else we can cut. Mockingbird is the best card in Thanos right now, one of the best cards in Marvel Snap. Like, again, I think I said Mockbird's top 10, I'd have Mockingbird top 5. If you watch every day, you know I did a last chance review where I basically begged you to buy Mockingbird, so Mockingbird is amazing. Cull, Professor X, Scar, a bunch of cards can replace anything along those lines in this deck, and it can still be a tier 1 deck. Devil Dino can replace a card. This is a tier 1 deck basically with all this stuff. It's just we're trying to figure out the exact perfect 12. We have so many versions of this. If you check base... Oh, sorry, before we talk about that. Rogue can replace Mobius in this deck. You're not going to lose anything major that way. Rogue is better in some cases. Mobius is easier to use, though. And there's like 10 million versions of this exact deck. We've been covering them on the channel. Like, if you check, I want to say Monday's video, we have some of it, or no, excuse me, the end of last week's videos, we have some of it. Just keep an eye out for basically, whenever I say best deck, because for a while that's been Thanos, which is why it just got nerfed in the OTA that we just talked about. Turn by turn, no one ever expects the Cannonball is the trick, and hopefully you get that reference. So turn 1, draw, turn 2, Jeffra, draw, Mind Stone is like super key. Turn 3, Hope over Psylocke over Mockingbird. Sometimes you're going to get Mockingbird, right? Because if you go whatever stone into whatever stone, that's a 3-cost Mockingbird for turn 3. You just played a 3-9, seems good. Turn 4, a 5 if you can, or Mockingbird. If you played Psylocke, you play a 5. If you can almost always pull off a Mockingbird here, you could also just drop some stuff on Hope and just have way too much energy for turn 5. Turn 5, a 6 if you can. If not, you're dropping Vision. And then turn 6, if you have Prow, you Alliath or Blob. If you don't have Prow, you Alliath, Shang, or Cannonball. If you can play any of those cards, particularly Shang or Cannonball, with Mockingbird because you didn't find time for it earlier, profit. One last look at this deck. This is one of the best decks in Marvel Snap. A version of this remains the best deck in Marvel Snap. I know it says Alex a 2-2. She's a 2-1. It takes a while for this stuff to update. But, yeah. Sorry, repeat. This is still the best deck in Marvel Snap until proven otherwise. It's just a little bit worse while still being the best than it was earlier today. Please hit that sub button, please hit that like, please hit that comment. We bring you 7 days of videos, at least 3 brand new decks every single weekday. We get exclusive decks from the best players. We're trying really hard to hit 10,000 subs, and we are 400 away. Please hit that sub button, like, comment, share, do whatever you can to help us get our last few subs. We would really, really appreciate it. All right, Iceman asks how much I enjoy the MCU out of comics. So this much. I've seen every single MCU movie from the first Iron Man to, I don't know, what was the last one? Whatever it was. I've seen every single one of them in the theaters. My tastes do not align to common perceptions. I think Shang-Chi is one of the best movies they've ever made. I don't know which ones I hate. I think Guardians 2 is fairly hated. I hate Thor Ragnarok, for example. So my tastes do not align with the masses. My tastes are my tastes. I like what I like. I don't like what everyone else likes. But I, generally speaking, absolutely love the MCU. I would consider myself a huge fan. Billy Brown asks, what archetype other than Thanos most needs a nerf / needs some love? Okay. So I don't think anything else needs to be nerfed right now. I think that's important. I think that, like, we don't know what the game looks like if Thanos isn't at the top of it, because there are things that are probably good that just don't see play because they can't compete with Thanos, but they could probably compete with other things. So I don't think anything else needs a huge nerf yet. As far as what needs some love, I still think Move needs one more piece to make it a little simpler to play. Move right now is a complete experts deck, and I think that the game would be more fun if we put Move in the hands of more players capably. So I think Move still needs that last bit of buff. And Kamehameha, which is a phenomenal name, wants to know if there are days I just don't want to open the app and how I push through. So, there are days where I just do my dailies and move on with life. I have decks and specific things I do for dailies. I know I should do that on Proving Grounds, and once I'm infinite, I very often just do my dailies not on Proving Grounds, but instead I do it on, sorry, cat ran by. Instead, I do them just on ladder, and I call it a day. I sit around rank 12,000 most of the time. I used to be around 5,000, and then I didn't care for a couple of seasons, and I dropped some more. Not worried about it. My true skill level is probably around 1 to 5,000 based on what happens when I actually try. Are there days I don't want to open the app? Sure. I guess sorta. But I just do dailies and I call it a day. As far as videos, this has been one of the first stressful weeks. I very rarely, this is like my stress release, not really my stress, but I'm trying to get everything organized for going away at the end of the week. And I don't have a lot of time because of the kid's birthday, and I'm trying to do the podcast, and I'm trying to do everything else. So that's been, I don't know, fairly overwhelming. This is one of the closest I've come to burning out. But hey, spoiler, on Saturday I'm going to the Dominican Republic. I'm going to lay on a beach for 4 days, and they will have videos every single day while I'm away. Literally, we're doing 2 guest videos for the 5 days I'm away, so I'm not even I don't even feel guilty this time. So I'll be back next Thursday with a video and record the podcast with Lambie next Friday, and things are going fine. But yeah, when life gets overwhelming, sometimes this can feel like extra, but life has to get real busy for it to actually affect anything. If you'd like your questions read out in tomorrow's video, please leave some in the comments. We have one more video before we start doing the pre-recordy stuff, although I have 1,000 questions on the Patreon, so that's pretty cool. All right. Ordinary Harry, Unordinary Loki. This is our friend Ordinary Harry. Actually, that's a lie. This is Ordinary Harry's deck. I've never spoken to Ordinary Harry. He's one of the very few people in the community I've never spoken to. Ordinary Harry is a European player who does not appear to be on, ever when I'm home from school. I'm a teacher, so he's basically never on when I'm home from work, and so we don't really interact often. Seems like a really nice person. Lots of people like him. Props to Ordinary Harry, because this is also a brilliant deck. I was talking to Gio about basically this deck earlier. Not Gio, one of the best players, about basically this deck earlier, and Harry took my half idea that I never told him about because we don't talk, and made it a real thing. I was like, hey, the Hella discard decks should totally run Loki. I don't know if they should run Lockjaw, I don't know if they should run Morbius, but they should 100% run Loki, because sometimes they just don't do the thing, and you sit there with a million cards in hand, so why would you not have Loki? Well, adding Nick Fury to that is completely brilliant, because Nick Fury feeds your collector. It gives you cards to Loki, it gives you 6s to discard for Hela. It's all around absolutely brilliant. I love this deck. This is fantastic. Alright, so you can find Ordinary Harry at twitch.tv/Ordinary Harry. In this deck, Meek can be Swarm or Sif. Loki and Corvus and Proxima and MODOK are needed. Sorry. Alright, so the hell? This says still whatever. Ignore the blue at the top. That's yesterday's blue at the top. Turn 1, you Meek or Quinjet. Turn 2, you Morbius over Collector. Unless you have Corvus, then Collector is better, usually. Sorry. I'm telling you, kid's birthday. It's been a rough one. You Collector over Morbius unless you're sure you're going to Corvus. I generally like to Collector first because Morbius is an ongoing, so if I'm going to end up discarding something, Collector needs to be on the board for power, Morbius doesn't. Turn 3 is Corvus is generally better than Morbius plus a 1, or Collector plus a 1. Turn 4, Loki or Fury. Fury is great if you Quinjet, if not, you don't have to. You can also throw down a MODOK if you don't have Hela and you have some good stuff to discard. Turn 5 is the same thing as turn 4, but sometimes if you MODOK'd and top decked Hela, you'll drop a Hela, and sometimes if you had Quinjet, you'll play one of the cards that Nick Fury gave you. Turn 6, also, sometimes you just Loki. Turn 6, Hela or a Fury card, and once in a while you will MODOK to pump up that Morbius and Collector to win the game. It's really good, it's really strong, it's really fun. Doesn't have Apocalypse, so no nerfs hit it. This is a great deck. This is like a 55% win rate, high infinite deck. It's both fun and powerful, and I strongly urge you, if you have the very expensive cards that are in this deck, to try it out. Alright, our last deck of the day is my favorite Cannonball deck so far. This is Gugly Ball. It is a lockdown deck. There's also some really good location stuff, control stuff you can do. But this deck feels absolutely phenomenal. I'm like 7-0 with this deck, 7-1 with this deck, something silly. It does a lot of really powerful stuff, and a lot of that is that like Debris is really good right now, right? Like this is a Thanos meta, and I don't know why it took us so long. Like I think Debris is the MVP, not Cannonball, and I'm not even sure you like 1000% need Cannonball for this list. But with Daredevil and Professor X, he's really good. Because if your Professor X goes off, you can usually get Debris or Goblin to fill a lane, which means Cannonball is Shang-Chi, except better because it doesn't have to be 10 or more power. Like, it's just great. Okay, so you can find Gugly at twitch.tv/Gugly_89. He's an Italian player. He speaks Italian, but he'll also speak English to you if you go check him out. He is phenomenal. He is like one of the main deck builders of the Italian community, and so far undefeated in their all-Italian tournament. So Cannonball can be Shang-Chi. You lose something, but not too much. This needs Jeff, like very badly with Professor X. You can try Medusa or Nightcrawler for Nebula. Nebula is again good. You want to be able to control where people play things. Alioth is a requirement, as is Annihilus, and Hope is a good thing still. Wave is sort of an okay replacement, but Hope is a good thing. Alright, Gugly is a top-ranked player. So turn 1, I like Nebula over Hood. Turn 1 is the only turn you really want to play Nebula. You'll play it on turn 2 if you have nothing else, but otherwise you would just like to play it on turn 1. Turn 2, Daredevil over Jeff. Turn 3, Hope over Debris, usually over Gabo. Turn 4, Sentry if you have Annihilus, but I really like a 3+1 here. That Demon or that Hood here, with Debris or the Green Goblin on Hope is just such a strong play. You then just have so much energy for that turn 5 Professor X or Annihilus that you're in really, really great shape. And then turn 6, you're Cannonballing or Aliothing, depending on whether you have priority or not. And then we profit. Once in a while on turn 6, by the way, I also played a Sentry and a Jeff to win one earlier, where like I locked down the right lane, so I just dropped a Jeff in the right lane, and then there was no downside to Sentry, so I played Sentry and had enough power to win. Very nice deck, very cool. Huge props to Gugly for this absolutely stellar list. I, again, absolutely love it. You should try it, I think, if you have the cards. Again, Cannonball is not a cheap card. It's also got frickin' Nebula, Jeff, Annihilus, and Alioth in it. Trust me, I recognize that, and Hope. I recognize this is not a cheap deck, but it is a powerful one, and I think this is the kind of thing you want to be doing if you have Cannonball. Alright. Finally, this was my shop for the day. I had the Max Greek take over like everyone else. I like Max Greek fine, but not enough to actually buy any of this stuff. But I did get my cool new Cannonball, so I have this Cannonball flying upside down in orange for some reason. I've also got 3 cool variants recently. I got the Hip Echo when Hip Echo popped up in the shop because, as always, I buy every den Hip. I now have the Peach Mocha and the Hip Echo, so Echo is a card I have absolutely beautiful variants for. I got the Spotlight Kitty Pride. Cannonball was my 3rd Spotlight key. I got the tokens, I got Kitty, then I got Cannonball. I would have been upset, but this Kitty is phenomenal. It's absolutely gorgeous, so I'm not that sad. And then I got this Nova. It's Mike Deodato, one of my favorite artists, and so I'm not sad to have a great Mike Deodato art piece, even if I'm not sure if I like it better than the, I don't actually know what it is, but the one where like he's punchy with energy. It came out fairly recently. Cool. Alright, certain tiers of support come with on-air thanks. We've got Abigail Giesland, Mandatory Burnout, Cables, David G. Wingfield, Direwolf, LAB, Father Newman, Good Dog Gamer, Inc., Jay Navarrete, J.D. McDonaldino, Akila Platano, Kertix Lee, Koire, KCH, Doku, Philip Rakovich, Haplo, Kenny Loggins, Rob Silverman, The Bizza, Jay Bussy, Xsource V, Skippy G, Tommy Nyquist, Black Dahlia, The Great Kazoo, Jessica Gamble, Models, Louis Antunes, Matt H., Mikey Hijinks, NoFlex, Ocularis, Pretty Chill, Seamus, Spike Jones, Two Ties, Tucker, The Pirate King, The Homie Min, and of course, Gunny T. That's it for this episode. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you're satisfied with the OTA. I am mostly not, but I think we're moving in the right direction. If you are watching at this point, hopefully you hit that sub button, hit that like, hit that comment. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. If you're willing, wish my son a happy birthday in the comments. I'd really appreciate it. I think it'd make him feel special. If you're interested in supporting the channel a bit more, check out the Patreon, patreon.com/snapjudgments. See you tomorrow for weekend mission decks and so much more. Peace.